First order of business is our consent agenda. We have the town accountant's warrants, our minutes from February 6th, April 12th, May 16th, and May 22nd. We also have the gift acceptances from the Concord Children's Center for $99,500 to the Concord Recreation Revolving Account. That is an incredibly generous amount. The Boston Foundation for $2,500 to the Nanai gift account. And the Concord Free Public Library, $1,000 to the library gift account. And we have several one-day special licenses. Saltbox Farm on July 28th from 6 to 10 p.m., 40 Westford Road for wine and malt beverages. Barrett Sotheby's on June 15th from 5:30 to 9 p.m. at 11 Wheeler Road, wine and malt beverages. Avi Shintov, hope I didn't do too bad job there, on the 17th of June from 12 to 5 at 269 Lyman Street for wine and malt beverages. Then we have Sunday entertainment licenses for 51 Walden Inc. on the 11th of June from 8 to 11 p.m. at 51 Walden Street for opera. We have an extension of hours for Saltbox Kitchen on June 12th from to 11 p.m. with last call at 10:30 p.m. for a private function. And then we have our tour guide renewals, as well as a proclamation for Race Amity Day on the 11th of June. And I need to see if I've got that information. Sure we can. Do we have that?
It's in the folder that has it all on it.
Just want to make sure we.
Did you want to read it?
Yes, I wanted to read it. For anybody that doesn't join us on the 11th.
It's in that folder right there where you're left.
Should be in that folder for ballots.
Sorry, front of me. Excuse us while we find the proclamation.
No, in the
In
folder.
In this red folder.
Yeah, last page, I think.
Okay. Maybe we'll come back to reading that proclamation.
Second page of staff right there.
Let's go, sorry.
Second page of that proclamation.
No, that's a do.
It's in there.
Oh, just
Okay.
Okay, we'll have to read it,
read it when we find it.
yes, when we find it. So, do I hear a move to approve the consent agenda?
Move to approve the consent agenda as read.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Now we have our executive session minutes from May 22nd, 2017. We hear a move to approve any executive session minutes of May 22nd?
So moved.
Not to be released?
Not to be released.
That'll be released.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And do I hear a move to approve executive session minutes number 2 from May 22nd? Not to be released.
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Town Manager?
Thank you.
What do we
Thank
have
you,
to
Madam
report?
Chair. The Town Treasurer, Carrie Lafleur, held a bond sale today for both the short-term notes for the school bus facility construction and the broadband that was authorized at annual town meeting, as well as for the refunding of the Willard School borrowing that she discussed with you last time. The results were very favorable. The short-term note interest rate is 1.069%, so just barely 1% for the short-term notes, and then the refunding of the Willard School debt is at 1.46%, saving $670,000 in interest
That's a
costs
lot
over
more
the life.
than we even
So that was far more than expected. So that was a good move on Kerry's part.
What was it, 1.0 something?
1.069. So, and they'll pass all those interest savings on to your savings account at the bank. The Zoning Board of Appeals and the Planning Board will hold a joint hearing tomorrow night, Tuesday, June 6th at 7:30 at 141 Kais Road to discuss the 11-unit Cuca Road PRD that's been proposed and under discussion for some time. Town staff are going to summer hours on Friday, June 30th, as has been their practice the last 6 years. Some departments, there won't be an impact on the public, but for the townhouse and 141 Kais Road, it will be closed at noon on Fridays. And the fire station, rehabilitation of Station 2, that following the fire, has progressed well. They've installed a sprinkler system, and the repairs are expected to be completed and the building ready for occupancy on July 1st. And that was fully covered by the insurance company, so that was a good result. The Concord Carlisle Youth and Community Services staff are requesting for the third year in a row that they're accepting donations of backpacks that will be given to needy students in September. Last year, they were able to provide 80 backpacks filled with school supplies on the first day of school, and donations can be submitted to the 105 Everett Street, the Harvey Wheeler, or at the Carlisle Town Hall. You mentioned the Jazz Fest earlier. There were about 500 people there. It sounded like it was a great time. Many people reported to the rec director they'd love to see it happen on an annual basis if possible. There were some favorable comments about the location, being it was easy for elderly folks to get to the park and have to walk a lengthy distance to get there. But I took note of your comments on the things that were improvements that were needed. And then lastly, relative to CCTV, Kate is meeting, that was not originally on the agenda for discussion tonight. Kate is meeting with Tamara and one of the board members of the CCTV board to have a discussion. She submitted to them a proposal, and we'll hear some feedback. My suggestion is that we allow the contract for CCTV to expire in 15 months when it ends. I think it would make sense to give it a try and let it happen sooner, but if they're really reluctant about that, that's something that we could just allow it to happen in 15 months on its own accord. So she's going to have a conversation with tomorrow. We'll see how it plays out, but I don't think it really rises to the top of our priority list such that we need to drop everything we're doing to, we're quite busy with a lot of things happening, and it just seems like it will happen of its own accord in 15 months. And that's all I have to report.
Thank you. All right, and I always have to check because it's 7:07, so we are right on time for our 7:05 public hearing on the change of manager for the 99 Restaurant, 13 Commonwealth Avenue.
I move to open the hearing.
Second.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So the public hearing is open. See, here we have. Welcome. Good. So, are you the new manager of record?
Yes.
Okay. And is this an annual, how long, what is your intended term?
They're permanent,
Permanent?
as far as we know.
Okay, yep. Good change. As of right now, yep. And I see that you've been TIPS trained and that the discussion or the request was reviewed by the chief of police and the staff and his Detective Keith Harrington, and it looks like everything is in order. Are there any questions from the board?
I had one, just, it's trivial, but in your application, one of the questions was, have you ever been a manager of record licensed to sell alcoholic beverages before? And you checked no.
I have not.
But down below, when it lists your employment history, it lists you as a manager of 99 Restaurant in Woburn.
I was an assistant manager in Woburn, but my name was not on.
It doesn't say that, it says manager.
It is a manager job. I was the general manager, but I was the.
But you weren't the manager of record.
No, I was not on the record for the liquor license there.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Just,
So I'm curious, didn't we recently have a hearing for the 99 for a manager of record? Is this a change of the manager? It seems like this was less than a year ago.
It would have been about a year ago.
And is that about the length of time managers stay, or they move sort of?
Usually not. There was some other stores outside of the Boston area that somebody left, and our general manager, Sam, who was the previous manager on record, got moved up to Waltham.
Thanks. We hope
And
you stay.
just for the record, Mr. Reed, could you identify yourself and address?
That's your wind-up.
That's a big deal. My name is Chris Comas, and I didn't hear the rest of your
Oh, just, and your address, please, of residence.
I live at 24 Merrimack Street in Lowell.
Thanks, just for the record.
Do I, let's see, are there any comments from the public? Hearing none.
I move to close the hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, so,
I move to approve Christopher Comas as manager of record at 99 Restaurant located at 13 Commonwealth Avenue. The manager must be engaged in the actual management of the licensed premises as his main occupation and must be present on the licensed premises for not less than 30 hours per week during the hours when alcoholic beverages are sold. Local approval is contingent upon final approval by the ABCC.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Thanks for
Welcome
coming.
aboard.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Okay, now I believe we have Ms. Rust. Can you state your name?
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Rust. I live at 201 Commonwealth Avenue, and I'm here as the manager of the Regional Housing Services Office.
Mhm.
And I have 3 agenda items back to back, so we'll just start with the first one, which is the signing and presumably signing, the voting and approval of the intermunicipal agreement. The Regional Housing Services Office is a regional collaboration of 7 towns. It has a 3-year term of the intermunicipal agreement, and so this is the anniversary. It is the practice to come before the boards of all towns every year, so that it's a very proactive management style, so to make sure that all towns are, actively involved. But this year is the full IMA approval.
And we are the host.
And you were the host, yes. So I thought I would just do a quick, while I was here, a quick, update status. So there's a little status report in your packet. We'd start with a sort of a year in review, talking about the overall service model. As I mentioned, it's a 7-town regional collaboration. It was started in 2001, so this is going on to the 7th year. The member towns, pay in for sort of a fee for service, and they get different kinds of monitoring, administrative services, and the lead community, which is Concord, has been for the last 3 years and will be for the next 3 years, not only receives services as a member town, but also hosts us. We are currently located at Keyes Road, and we are in the process of moving over to Knox Trail. We're outfitting our new space, so we'll have our facility over there, which, since Acton is part of the collaboration, it's going to work well. We're just in both towns at the same time. So there's a little on the picture there. You can see it's very small, I guess, on mine. But there are over 5,000 housing units on the subsidized housing inventory between the 7 towns. So there's a lot of housing units that we look after. There's over 300 ownership units, so that's each individual owner. And combined with all the towns, there's a combined SHI percentage of over 10%. So between all the towns, there's a lot of interest and activity in housing, and only Acton and Weston are below the 10% in and of themselves. So there is a lot of effort, and some people think that once you get over the 10%, why would we spend more on housing? But the actual maintenance and monitoring and preservation of the housing really is so important, and you spend so much time and energy to get that affordable housing in place. So for the year in review, we have really put together a few bullets on the RHSO, aside from the individual communities. So we have a website, which is www.rhsohousing.org. So that's useful for staff as well as residents and prospective residents. We are doing training. We do training for the owners, like sort of a post-purchase maintenance, budgeting, condominium rules and regulations, that sort of thing. And we're also sponsoring, starting actually tomorrow, and there's another session next week, of fair housing training, a custom orientation or session oriented towards boards, municipal boards and committees. So I think that maybe that material was even sent to you. If you wanted to come, there's still opportunity. We'll be at Harvey Wheeler tomorrow at 7.
It sounds like information would be useful for those not even participating in subsidized housing or.
Oh, yes, it's for a permitting boards and just to understand sort of the case law. What are the parameters that, as a municipal official, what are the parameters that you're working within? We always want to, I just sort of pause, I don't know the best way to say this, right? But we always want everyone to remember what the protected classes are, including families with children, so, students. We always want to be mindful of how we talk about housing for families in our zoning, in our permits. And there's a fine line. Everyone knows that municipal expense is, of course, front and center on people's minds, but there is the fair housing case law and rules that everyone needs to be mindful of. So that's just sort of one example that comes up pretty much in every town, right? So we do monitoring, as I mentioned, the owners. We send out letters and we're in direct communication with each owner. We look for a 94 response rate. That's what we've been getting over the last 6 years. So this year we were up to 95. Very good. And in Concord it was 96. So there you go. We help property managers improve compliance. And in Concord, we work very closely with Warner Woods and the Concord Muse to help them review their rents and their recertification and standards and that kind of thing.
What percent is rental versus ownership of the housing?
In Concord?
Yeah.
You would ask me that question. So, well, there's many different ways of measuring that. So on the subsidized housing inventory that measures the 10%, for rental, you get credit for, all the units, all 350 units at the Muse, even though only 25% of them are affordable. So it's hard to count all 350 as affordable, even though you get credit for them. But I'm going to say that the restricted ownership units, which would include the moderate income units, at Black Birch, maybe there are 50 to 60 in Concord, and maybe there's 370 or something on the subsidized housing inventory, if I can remember the numbers right, something, I don't know. So there's going to be more rental units than ownership units.
By a lot.
By a lot.
By a lot, even though some of those rental units are not actually.
Right, so even just the strictly affordable rental units, there's going to be more of those because you have a significant number at the Muse. Warner Woods has, a big number. You have all of the housing authority units. So I'm sorry, I don't have those right at my fingertips. In terms of the highlights of year in review, across all the towns in the RHSO, over $7 million was appropriated at this year's town meetings across the towns. So that was really a strong statement for affordable housing across the towns, and certainly Concord did their share of that with the Junction Village. Some major projects that we've worked on, aside from the general monitoring, of course, is Junction Village with the town meeting affirmative action, as well as assisting with the ZBA and the comprehensive permit, which was recently issued. Peter Bulkley, which is the next agenda item, we'll talk about that, the home funds that were dedicated there. And resales, there were a couple of ownership units that came up for resale, and then working on the town's behalf on the Black Birch, the moderate income deed restrictions and closing documents to properly record those units.
And have you started on the next two?
Well, I think that's still in the permitting phase, but we would start there. But in terms of the 3 moderately restricted units, 1 closed last summer and 2 are coming up and have just, the buyers have just gotten their financing commitments, so the closing documents are all in draft form now.
Was there a lot of, do you know, was there a lot of demand for those units at Blackbird?
So the moderate income units, I mean, the list was fairly deep. Maybe 12 people were interested, and the people who were interested were very interested. And the top 3 took it right off the bat, and number 4, 5, 6, they still call, hoping that something's going to fall through. I mean, they're beautiful units, and they're at a nice price point for Concord. So generally, I've spoken about the RHSO work plan. We do the monitoring, program support for home. We've also taken over the small grant administration for the CHDC and some of their work. That used to be done by Laura Kreitzer out of the planning office, and so that was just kind of a change in a staffing function, if you will. We help Lane with the assessments of the deed restricted properties, and have worked very closely with him over the years. And in fact, he recommended us to the Department of Revenue as they were providing guidance on how to assess deed restricted properties, doing trainings and speaking at conferences on your behalf, and local board and support. So that's really development projects and the kind of work that we've been talking about. So for next year, aside from our moving, which is kind of big for us, but no one really comes to visit us, so I think no one will really notice when we moved. And we would really just continue the work plan, continue the projects and the activities. We have no sort of change in responsibility. Yeah, so I think that.
How large is the staff? What is?
Oh, thank you. So we have 4 people. We all work part-time. We're all contractors, and we've all just responded to the RFP issued by Concord. We haven't heard yet whether we've been awarded the contract. We're all assuming that we're on board for the next cycle. So there are 4 people in the office, all with housing background. So it's really a well-oriented staff, and I think it works well. I don't know if everyone else does, but we feel it all works well. So we have some information on the hours. Everyone buys a certain amount of hours. Concord will be buying a few more hours next year than in the past. I think that's partly because of the increase of time that's spent with the CHDC. And in summary, we are completing the 6 years of operation, and we thank you for your continued support, especially Concord has been so kind, I guess is the word, I don't know, but welcoming to hosting us. Even though we've taken up the conference room up there in Kite Road, everyone's been very kind.
That routinely for your other meetings.
Running
So
down,
you're very
using all the
gracious.
printers and what have you. But I think it's worked very well. It's a very central location to all the member towns, and we're always interested in people's comments and feedback. We think it still continues to be an innovative approach and useful and valuable to the towns that we serve.
How many RHSOs are there in?
There are 3. One that's based out of Hudson and one that's based out of Reading.
Okay.
And do they have as many towns within there?
So the one based out of Reading is 4 towns, and the one based out of Hudson, I believe, is 5 towns. So here are 7. And there are 2 other communities that have approached us about joining here. In the IMA is an upper limit of 9 communities, and the communities must be contiguous. There's always, it's a delicate balance to making sure that we can absorb another community without diluting any support to any of the communities that we service now. And can we assist towns in the manner that they want to be assisted? Some people, everyone has like an affordable housing staffing issue, or I don't know how to say that. They're like, oh, we could just outsource it to these people and they'll take care of it. And could we really take care of it? Sometimes I don't know that we would be the answer. So it's really that kind of balance. So we're very careful about recommending, and then it's really up to Chris to accept that recommendation with an endorsement by the advisory committee. So Burlington was the last organization that came in, and that worked well for everybody. So these other 2 towns, I don't know whether they would progress. but there is a fixed cost that would be useful financially to leverage between other towns if the other pieces could come together.
Right. And is there a timing on that, or is that just?
Well,
Whenever it
they
happens.
missed this particular timing for the budget. So when Burlington came in, they came in as a Burlington and Concord agreement mid-year, and then they picked it up in the amendment cycle. So there's a way of handling it, however it seems to make the most sense.
So I was curious, maybe Chris knows, is this a semi-permanent location at Knox Trail, or is this again a 1 year?
I would say semi-permanent. It is disruptive to the staff of the and our contractors, the RSO contractors, to move around for purposes of IT, to having a website, for those types of things in particular. So I thought it was reasonable. Originally, Acton had volunteered to be the host community for these 3 years, and 37 Knox Trail happens to be in Acton, and we went through a lot of effort to set our IT staff to set these folks up with IT addresses and their website and stuff like that. The investment seemed worth continuing it for at least another 3 years, and we'll evaluate it then.
It's great.
Yeah.
Glad to hear that it's volunteer.
There's some extra office space on the second floor there, so it seems like it could be a good fit.
Good. Great.
Great.
I can't wait to have it sort of finished.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's this agenda item, right? So if you, the actual IMA requires each of your signature, so you would presumably vote and accept and sign.
Yeah, I think Beth and her group has been very valuable in supporting our efforts and our commitment to affordable housing. They're there helping us, as things that obtaining funding with for Peter Buckley's project with the Home Consortium, and supporting the CHTC with data or research or some guidance there, and to be managing 5,000 units across 7 towns, that's quite the feat. Yeah, and it really is, and I think that helps our region, because a family may need something in our area, and if it's 1 town or 2 towns over, it's still, it could still make that difference. So I think we should definitely continue our commitment, and it's great.
Yeah, I totally agree, and they were also very helpful as we were trying to understand the Junction Village project and providing a lot of data and support for that. We're grateful.
Thank you. I think it's a tremendous asset to the town. Do I hear a motion?
Yes, I move to approve the regional housing intermunicipal agreement.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. On to number 2.
The Peter Buckley, this is what we call phase 2, which is the first phase was 24 units, and then this second phase is the last four because the project was originally contemplated to be 28 units, and I think the funding ran out, and so phase 2 came forward. And I'm here tonight because additional funds have been available, have been made available through the Home Consortium, and so that they can be applied to this project. And then the corresponding amount of funds can be subtracted from CPA, leaving more housing money in CPA, which is a very welcome thing. This whole project, which is now going to be almost $500,000 of home funds, the total project is, I think, $838,000. So well more than half will be funded from the Home Consortium, all through the competitive pool process. So if you remember how the home fund process works, each town gets their money, and you have exclusive use for a year, and then if you don't use it, it goes into this competitive pool, and you apply for that. So this project has been able to apply 3 times to that competitive pool, and each time successful.
And is that on an annual basis? It's a year?
Annual basis. Yeah. So, so this last, this would be the last. This last bit of funding is is how much of it is it? Is it like 130? Yeah, thank you, 100, right there, first line, 130,517.48. It requires a second amendment to the home funding agreement. So there was the home funding agreement and affordable housing restriction that was signed, and then one amendment when additional funds came in, and here's this last amendment. The final requisitions are kind of coming in, so the project is nearing completion. And in fact, this is a good time to mention that next Monday, they're having an open house to show off the units. So this is next Monday, June 12th, 3 to 4 at the Peter Bulkley Terrace. So I know that they would be delighted to see any of you, and of course, anyone who's listening in can come.
That's exciting.
Yeah. And so this particular document, I think, is to be signed by Chris, so it's looking for your vote and approval. And I think that this is just the kind of project that the Home Consortium likes to fund. It's new units, and on a per unit basis, it's very competitive. So on both fronts, the project got money from, there were town funds earmarked for affordable housing. I think it was an offset to a Munson Road, PRD maybe. There was DHCD funding, and then CPA being the last. So, spend all these other monies and then go in with CPA. So the CPA was originally approved at town meeting for $370,000, 804. And it's really going to be reduced by almost $200,000 based on the project coming in and other funds being made available. So that's all great news.
I think we somehow jumped to number ahead of one because we've got the revolving fund.
Oh, I thought that was the third. Did I?
That's okay.
Oh, no,
So
I
that
did miss those.
everybody's on.
Okay, sorry.
But is there a reason that we can't? Okay.
Let's get this
Sorry,
$200,000.
thank you.
Let's get this done.
All right, I
Sorry
move to
about that.
authorize the town manager to sign the home project funding agreement amendment.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Thank you. So that was, agenda item 8. So now going back to agenda item 7, this really is a very minor administrative detail. The revolving fund is set with an upper limit, and over this year, many communities have purchased more hours. So keep giving us more money and we expand our contract, but then the spending limit also needs to increase. So the Finance Committee approved this last week, or I think the 25th of May, and then the procedure is for you to also approve.
Sure.
Any questions from you?
No. Move to approve the RHSO request to increase the revolving fund spending limit from $210,000 to $225,000 per memo dated May 10th, 2017.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Good, thank you so much. Thank you.
So June 12th, 3 to 4.
Yeah, exactly.
If you haven't already seen this
Yeah, I'm looking
unit,
forward
it's
to
it. Very nice.
Concord. It's
Very
an
nice.
amazing architecture piece.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Really well done.
really quite
Alright.
nice.
Delia, I think that you are on next. Thank you, thank you.
Good evening.
Please introduce yourself for those who haven't had the pleasure of meeting you.
I'm Delia Kay, I'm the Natural Resources Director for the town, and here to update the board on the Estabrook Woods Study Access Committee recommendations to provide more balanced access and improved access to Estabrook Woods. And I have what is hopefully a brief presentation for you, but I thought pictures would be helpful to sort of see how things are in the context. And I'm sure it'll be up momentarily.
Can feel them coming.
If you can handle town meeting, you can do this.
Yeah.
Mute button is probably on.
This one usually comes on first.
Yeah, no, I just tested it probably right before this. I'll take 1 second.
It's showing a red signal.
Yeah, looks like my computer's actually frozen.
Technology at its best.
Find a proclamation.
Ah, yes, have we found the proclamation? Oh, you know what? I think I have it in my.
Oh, it's in our notes.
in our-
It's in our packet.
So why don't we take this moment to read the proclamation that will be offered on, yep, on June 11th. Commonwealth of Massachusetts Town of Concord Select Board, proclamation on Race Amnesty Day. Whereas Concord supports the Great Seal of the United States of America, which bears the inscription E pluribus unum, I've always wanted to say that, which translates from Latin as out of many, one. And whereas the greatest asset of the town of Concord is its people, and whereas the town of Concord is comprised of multicultural, multi-ethnic, and multiracial citizens, and whereas friendship, collegiality, civility, respect, and kindness are commonly shared ideals of collective citizenry of the town of Concord, and whereas the Towards E Pluribus Unum initiative has invited communities across the United States of America to join in introspection and reflection on the beauty and richness of the diverse people of this great nation, while reaching out with a spirit of amity toward one another annually on the second Sunday in June. And whereas H. 2745, Chapter 163 of Acts of 2015 of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts establishes the second Sunday in June annually as Race Amnesty Day. Now, therefore, we, the Concord Select Board, do hereby proclaim June 11th, 2017 to be Race Amnesty Day, and urge all the citizens of the town to take cognizance of this event and participate fittingly in its observance. Thank you. And in many ways, that's not a bad lead-in.
Thank you. So this is a map of Estabrook Woods up on the screen, and the pointer unfortunately does not work on the screen here. So I'll highlight on the screen behind, but I think that the select board probably has a pretty good sense of where things are laid out. Punkatassett is the main property that the town owns within the Estabrook Woods. With the Sawmill Brook parcel, it's about 100 acres. And then up close to the Carlisle town line, further up Monument Street, is the Monument Farm Road conservation land. So those are the two access points that the town controls, and which the select board directed the NRC and me to investigate how we could improve the parking in those areas. So for Punkatassett, it's outlined in green in this parcel here. It's part of the larger Estabrook Woods. And that is just sort of an overview of what Punkatassett looks like. This is a bit of a zoomed in parcel, and Punkatassett is outlined in blue. And the Apthorpe parcel is the Trustees of Reservations parcel here with frontage on Monument Street. And it is sort of in the center of the parcel here. The town has this frontage on Monument Street, which we're calling the southern access or the southern entry, and then the northern entryway here. And for Punkatassett itself, when the town acquired the land in 1971, parking was already identified as a problem even then. And in 1975, the NRC reluctantly approved a 15 to 20 car parking lot within Punkatassett. That would have been quite far into the woods. My understanding is that it was the dressage ring off Two Rod Road in this area here, which is about a quarter mile into the woods. That was never constructed. And then there's really nothing more in the file except that at that time there was parking on both sides of Monument Street, and it was restricted to the western side or the northern side of Monument where parking is currently occurring. And then, as the board knows, the Estabrook Woods Access Committee looked at trying to provide better parking at Punkatassett, including looking at putting it on conservation land as well as improvements to Monument Street itself. So the NRC looked at both of these points, and the southern access, I'll just go into a little bit about the pros and cons of each of these, which the NRC has looked at. So for the southern access way, I'm going to go back and forth between two separate drawings, which is this one here, which shows grading in red. You can see on this drawing that the main entranceway into Punkatassett is quite flat. It is, however, narrower than the northern access. The northern access is 50 feet wide. The southern access is 28 feet, where it is intersecting with Monument, and it expands up to 50 feet, right at the sort of trailhead here, in this location here. So the variability in width is probably a pro for the northern access. A con for that northern access is that it is difficult to get people. If you put a parking lot in here, it is challenging to get people. You either have to direct them back along Estabrook to get them along the main trail here, or if you have them park here, they would either have to walk along the Apthorpe parcel boundary to get to the trail here, or you could walk them through Punkatassett and over the old farm road into this area here. The difficulty is that this is, private property on both sides, and it would require some means of fencing or signage or other means to keep people off private property. So the other challenge with the northern entrance is, of course, the grading. You can see on this drawing here, or this map, that there's quite significant grading challenges that are provided. Anything can be engineered, but the impacts to the land are they're quite a bit more substantial in terms of the grading. So the NRC pursued engineering designs along the southern entryway, and I should mention as well that both the access points, the southern access and the northern access, have easements on them that are owned by, or that are held by the trustees of reservations that were initially granted to the Apthorpes, that do provide the ability for both of those entrances to be used by the inhabitants of the Apthorpe parcel house, which is owned by the trustees. So the NRC, now we're looking at an engineered drawing with Monument Street on the right-hand side here, the Apthorpe house here, and this is 851 Monument Street here. So the NRC looked at a couple of different options for parking, and one of them is this option that allows for parallel parking for 12 spaces along the southern entryway, with the ability for cars to turn around here. The idea would be that you could have two cars that would be able to pass along about 45 feet in the beginning, and then they would be directed to come in and turn around and face outwards. That did meet with a little bit of concern from the neighbors raised concerns about emergency access, whether the vehicles could pass safely. I did run that by town staff, and their feeling was that, you could provide that if the, situation was perfect. It does provide currently in this drawing a 12-foot wide. The preference of the fire department is 14 feet. That could certainly be accomplished. It would mean that in this area where the parking spaces are, that it would have to widen out by 2 feet, which could be accomplished. So the next option, or the second option that the NRC looked at, which they had initially discounted because of the problems or the concerns about placing a parking lot into the trailhead at Punkatassett, was this 12-car lot right at the trailhead. And in talking with town staff and then again with the NRC, it seemed that this was a more feasible option because you did not have potential conflicts with, snow removal and cars parking poorly if they were parallel parking. So it was the consensus of the NRC as well as town staff that was a preferred option. And that was determined at their last meeting that they discussed this, which was the middle of May. And last week, we had myself and a couple of members of the NRC had a meeting with the neighbors, and a couple of members of the select board were there as well as the police chief. And the goal of the meeting initially was to see if we could find ways to make this proposal something that would, were there ways that we could mitigate it so that it was less impactful to the abutters. And at that meeting, there was a lot of concern about that location, primarily from a safety and security standpoint from the abutters and the neighbors. What is currently shown now in this design is problematic. It's not visible from Monument Street. It could be realigned so that this square here is now where the parking lot is, which makes it partially visible from Monument Street. The police chief was at the meeting, and I've spoken to him about this one-on-one, and his feeling is that while visible parking lots are preferred, that this is a workable solution. And so we're sort of at a point where we have this possibility, but at the meeting that we had with the neighbors last week, there were concerns raised that the NRC had not evaluated the parking on Monument Street as an option. That was recommended in the Estabrook Woods Committee's recommendation, where they asked the NRC to work with the public safety staff and the neighbors to determine if there was the ability to safely park some or all of the cars on Monument Street. And the NRC had looked at that, and you can, park cars there. But I think we're at a point where we may need to bifurcate this process a little bit. And if the select board feels that it's worth exploring that Monument Street parking further, that it should be something that is put to the traffic management group for evaluation to see if that's a feasible option for parking some or all of the vehicles at Punkatassett.
Just to be clear, Delia, the parking along Monument Street would not be under the NRC's direct control, or would it?
It's within the public right-of-way, so it would not be under the NRC's control. It would determine whether or not any, parking is put onto the Punkatassett land.
Right, it would be obviously
right. So it would inform that
impactful,
decision, but it would not be within the NRC's control.
And this option, as I recall, would essentially attempt to move the parking back off of Monument Street, depending upon the width of the right-of-way.
Right.
Is that correct?
So this probably shows it the best. The red lines here show Monument Street right-of-way. It's a 50-foot wide right-of-way. And then this line here is the edge of pavement. And then this smaller line here is the existing stone wall.
right. So it's the stone wall and the trees that are.
So you could, the NRC, as I said, they looked at it. This is not their area of expertise, nor is it mine. But in my opinion, you could put cars there. You would remove some or all of those mature oaks. You would need to relocate that stone wall, but you could provide parking there.
And how many cars would you be able to park along the Monument Street
I-
if you did all that work?
I don't know.
But
Did the police-
excuse me, Tom, would it also extend to this side of Monument Street, that you would be able to expand?
On the other side?
Toward town?
This side of the right-of-way?
Yes. Well, you've got the new driveway here, so you do have the ability, but you have less ability here. There's the stone wall there. It's closer to the right-of-way. So what you have,
So you don't gain
Existing-
quite as much.
you have very little room on that side.
And that's where you're going, right into that corner, right?
And what about back up toward the property to the north?
That hasn't been surveyed. The engineering department probably has plans that show that right-of-way. You're talking further north along the same
Toward the
side.
north- Toward the
Right.
north easement.
Yes, there's possibility you get into, grading challenges.
Right.
Yeah, I remember.
Did the police chief have concerns about safety of parking on Monument Street?
It is not his preference. But if
That would
it,
seem to me that that would be one of the problems with that, is if you're gonna be getting in and out of vehicles, and you've got a pet, or you've got children, and
right,
you've got traffic. So-
But at least for the area that you're talking about, when Jane and I were at this meeting with the neighbor, that, there was quite an amount of area that you could add to the roadside. It was, I think, 16 feet, is that what you said?
something like that. I mean, that's roughly what it looks like. I mean, there is about 15 feet from the edge of pavement to the right-of-way, but there's
It
a
slopes
grade.
down and there's,
And
yeah,
you're gonna
Going
have,
north, but really there's a.
Right.
you're gonna have the
Right.
plowing and all the rest of it, that,
Is it the NRC's intention that if, say you used one of the off-street parking schemes, so there'd be 12 spaces, would you still allow parking on the street?
That would not be the
So-
recommendation. It would be to remove parking for
Right,
monuments.
so you would, if you did this scheme, let's say, there could still be people parking on the street. They could try to, right, do what they're doing right now, which is just pull over and.
They could. I mean,
So
so
if
there
you
was some
did-
discussion
if you
about
did
that,
this-
whether it was better
yeah.
signs, or if, boulders, which, again, I think that would
Right,
be something that the traffic management group should weigh in on.
But if you just improve the street parking,
Mhm.
that's it, that, you hit that maximum space, that there's nowhere else to go.
They could manage some of that traffic with traffic calming.
and I'm more concerned, I think safety is
Yeah.
kind of gonna
Yeah.
be the number one issue, and that would be my concern, is the safety issue.
well, the parking management group would be, I would assume that safety starts the
Town
conversation.
engineer, public works director, yep.
Can I ask one more question about the lot back at the end? When we were there talking, there was that, I forget what kind, was it pine sitting there? And I'm not asking you to actually do this, but if the pine went out, it seems to me the parking lot could be quite visible
Yeah.
from Monument Street by relocating it more toward the north side of that easement.
Agreed.
Isn't there a small square actually built?
Yes.
Yeah, that's,
That smaller square that's sketched in
Yep.
shows that shifting slightly to the north for better visibility and taking out that large pine.
which I believe
It's
is
pretty compromised
pretty
anyway.
compromised,
At least
right?
one of them, it's got like three main branches, one of them I thought was
Yeah.
dead.
Yep.
Well, I know we heard a lot from the neighbors, and there's, real concerns about not only access to the woods, but safety, and the impact on the neighbors. I'd be supportive. Is it real costly to get this parking study done? Would it be?
On the street?
On the,
To have that done?
on the street piece.
I think it's manageable. I think we would contract it out. The town engineering staff is quite busy. This is their construction
Yeah.
season right now, so we
How-
probably have to
how-
have somebody
I
come in.
know you don't know, but estimating what kind of a timeframe this would be?
How long would it take?
Because you'd have to do an RFP, is that?
It depends on the estimated cost. But we could probably get 3 quotes, so we wouldn't have to go through the formal RFP
Okay.
process, so that speeds it up. But I'd probably be 60 days by the time we had somebody on board, I suspect.
So it would take us into the fall before we probably would have some sense of,
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
Does that sound reasonable?
for 8 weeks, I think, to come up with an understanding. I mean, I think the other question that needs to be addressed is if you have on-street parking, people are either driving in and then they're turning around, or they're coming from, depending on which direction, people are usually going back in the same direction that they've come from. And that also should be part of that analysis, is how do you turn people around?
yep.
You know what the speed limit is in Monument Street in that area, is it 35?
It's 30 and 35, and,
Whether you're coming or going.
Going.
Right.
Exactly.
'Cause I'm also concerned people probably backing in or parallel parking, and,
so people, either, if they're driving north on Monument, they will either pull in and face the wrong way, or they'll turn around, I think typically in the Churchill driveway, which is the northern entrance. Sometimes the Whites have said that people will turn around in their driveway as well.
But that is a public, that's a public access. It's Churchill's driveway, but it's also public. right?
Correct, that's true, that is the town land. I don't think that the safety officer would appreciate people turning around in it.
Parallel to Monument Street, rather than pulling in on an angle and side.
It would have to be
The
parallel.
road, the road's
Right.
on a,
Yeah.
the road is curving though.
Right.
So, it's not as straight a shot. So you need that width to really get clear of the,
To get off the street.
yeah.
Well, I don't know what we need to do, but I think we've heard a lot from the neighbors. I think if we can get this done in a relatively short amount of time, it's not too expensive. I would say I still clearly prefer that, even if it works on it, but I think we should go
You
ahead.
prefer Monument Street on
No, I
street parking?
prefer that to
Right.
Monument Street, but
But we
I
should,
think we should get it done and take a look at it.
Yeah, I like the concentrating all the cars in one designated area. I think the parallel parking on this access road would just, that is unattractive to me. And I think even on Monument Street, to just see the cars there. But I mean, some of the neighbors were voicing their preference for
Well,
that.
you think of the two abutting neighbors there, and what that's gonna mean is that, relatively during the times that it's used, a relatively continuous
flow.
movement of cars back and forth along that relatively narrow access point.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Well, I think at the very least,
I think we ought
taking a
to
look at,
look at it. I mean, if it turns out,
Including moving the stone wall and perhaps grade.
I think that's the only way we could do it.
I think you'd have to
Yeah.
do this, so it's not just a matter of making what's
No.
there nicer looking.
No.
You've gotta get it.
There's not enough space as it
I'm
is.
no engineer, but it looked as if you moved the stone wall, it looked as if you could get a car parked and you would still have, I don't know whether you would actually pave it or put asphalt down or something, but you could have a walking path.
Okay.
I mean,
People
not-
prefer that? I mean, we're not rebuilding the stone wall, are we?
well, we just moved it.
Relocate it,
We would move it.
costs the same.
But that's on
Yeah.
town
Pretty
land,
expensive.
right? Is that our wall?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's in the right of way.
It's money.
Yeah, I don't
It's-
prefer it, but I think in deference to the process, a lot of people have been involved in this. We ought to take a look at it, and if it's feasible, then we can come back and take a look and see what we think, and if it's not, it's not.
Right.
Move on.
But right now, we don't know, so,
We don't know. As long as safety people are looking at it, I'd like to know the cost to do it,
Right.
because it's not gonna be, doing this isn't cheap either, but as Dewey pointed out, it's pretty flat, so it's not.
right. But we need to be able to compare things.
Have we done a traffic study on Monument Street recently to know how many cars go travel Monument Street and
No,
at what speed?
I think that was
'Cause
something also raised by,
It just seems to me that if we're thinking about adding considerable parking on Monument Street, it would be good for us to know what the current traffic is like, how fast cars go, and if we need to think about traffic calming,
Yeah,
if
that
we were
would
to
be-
put this in
I
place.
think that would be part of the study, wouldn't it?
I don't know if it is, that's my
It
question.
could be,
And-
could be.
If they could fix the potholes too.
yeah.
The bike ride, I have to
I know,
pay so
I
much
know.
attention
As
now.
long as this
You
isn't
do.
gonna
It's really
come
hard.
down the road work on Laurel Road.
Well,
With the sinkhole.
and traffic,
So it's
looking at
12
traffic calming
cars.
on Monument Street was actually a direct request of the Estabrook Woods Access Study Committee, so we should be including that
Hard to
regardless.
understand, we were told, I didn't notice it before, but it's really a 5-mile-an-hour
Difference.
variance between coming. I don't
So that's a
know
little
if it's
unusual.
traffic, but-
One's uphill, one's downhill.
But it's a curve there.
It's
Well, it's a curve, but you're also you feel the up and downs on the bike.
Now, what's the speed for bicyclists? That's the question.
As fast as you can go.
Yeah.
Do we need a motion or do we just a sense of?
Does it, I don't
No,
know.
I think
No.
we can make a request and,
I'll get a quote quotes for engineering services and a price, what that will cost, and we'll locate the funds, and I think it'll take 60 days to get somebody on board and get them working.
But this
And
is-
I'll also offer it to the public works staff to see if those engineers want to get a break from paving and drainage. But
we won't tell them about the
Do we have
potholes.
do we have the capacity, I mean, other than time, are we able to do this kind of study routinely? What would be required in this analysis?
in-house would be a challenge, I think, if
They can
contracting
put,
it out.
yeah, a traffic consultant
Right,
could
that's
put a
what-
counter out there, but
Delia, will you also be, I know it costs money to have this done, but will you also be exploring the relocation of that rectangular parking lot, moving it back so we can see what that would look like?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you
I
thought this,
expect, so the NRC will look at this design Wednesday night, and I expect that will be their
What's that?
right,
request as well.
right.
what do you think?
Thanks so much.
Well, thank you, Delia, and I'll see you
Thanks,
on
Delia.
Wednesday night.
Thanks to
Very
all the
good.
neighbors.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
350 all in.
I know that we're not at public comment, but I assume everybody is
my
leaving
estimate.
is
325.
happy with that? Okay. Good.
That's my estimate.
For construction.
Plus 25K for consultant.
Peter, if you want to come up and identify yourself quickly.
Peter, thank you.
Thank you. To Peter Gifford, 1171 Monument Street. As far as a traffic study goes, could it be written in the traffic study that, or on the engineering study, that maybe only 4 spaces be put out on Monument Street, so we minimize any of the cutting of those beautiful trees? It also would cost a lot less because you're dealing with a smaller amount of wall that has to be moved. a
Well, I think
smaller
that
amount.
when we start to change what we're looking at is the feasibility period.
Right.
And what it would look like, I mean, this isn't a decision, this is
Oh, no, I
a
understand.
question mark.
Right.
So you're asking,
mean-
can we do it in pieces or?
Well, as long as it's as long as it's
One option two.
as an option within it, and then taking, so if it was only 4 cars there, and then dismissing the basic idea of the rectangular further in parking lot, and going back to the parallel parking and allowing only 6 cars on the parallel parking, so there's a lot less traffic going up and down the right-of-way. You can see the parallel parking from the street. And I would think, Stephen was concerned about the cost of moving the stone wall. My suspicion is that if you put 4, you do the scenario that I was explaining out on the street, and then only going to 6 parallel on the right-of-way, is gonna be a lot cheaper than building a 12-car parking lot further in. I don't know, just,
Yeah.
So your
So it's-
proposal is a hybrid?
As a hybrid, right,
Yeah.
okay.
thank you.
Yep, thanks.
Well, the only thing I want to say is that we are going to need to make sure we've got more than just the 10 spots. So I mean, we're really aiming to get 12 spots
Yeah,
total. No, hybrid's fine, I don't.
sure. Well, if you had 4 in
Whatever,
the
Right.
look at
section, and
it.
then 2 in front of the White's House,
Right.
and then
Yeah, but
6.
again, that's a safety
Yeah.
issue there, I mean, because you can't, apparently, you
Right.
can't move, even if
Yeah.
it's costly, so,
Yeah.
but the hybrid
But-
idea is a good one.
Yeah,
And we are supposedly picking up 3 up at Monument Farm, so that brings us up to 13. Anyway, food for thought.
okay,
Yeah,
thank
Thank
you
you.
very much. All right, so I think that moves us on to the monopoles, the MBTA, our discussions and comments, possible comments on the MBTA's concerning the 70-foot monopoles for wireless service. These are 3, right? 3 sites,
Currently, yep.
which are proposed right now for Neshoba Road,
Arena Terrace.
Arena Terrace, and
adjacent to the
Beharrell,
Bradford Furniture.
Bradford Mill, Beharrell Street.
Want me to put them up on the screen?
Why don't you, I think that'd be useful to the
Where do you want to start first?
So, but our input on this is we can write a letter.
Right, and that, but just to let everybody know where they are, I think that as a board, we have been able to review comments made on similar activity by other towns in the area, and have been convinced that, or should certainly discuss and think about, the feasibility of writing a letter and making a request. And I think our town planner has offered us one, a draft, to consider writing to Mr. Rice of the MBTA.
So this is the arena.
He's with the vendor, right, in motion?
Yes, he's with the vendor, but the question is whether or not they, the purpose of our letter would be to look at a time extension so that we could get further information on the impact. I know there's a potential historic concern, historic district.
Well, the
Or
historical
historical
commission,
review-
the
historical
historical commission
commission.
discussed this one evening, earlier late last May.
Mhm.
And according to what the guidelines are, there's only one location of the monopole that may have a viewscape interruption for the historic commission.
Okay.
And that's the one that's by Bradford Road, that, at the height of one of the chimney towers, or,
Oh, okay.
and that would be viewed from the historic district and just outside the historic district. And that would be the only comment the historic commission would be able to comment on within their jurisdiction. That location had not been opposed by the Bradford Mills folks.
Okay. But as I think we've seen in some of the further comments, we have the ability to look at both the area directly disturbed by the proposed monopoles as well as the area of potential effect, unfortunately acronymed APE, as well as the indirect, the viewshed area, and request a more detailed summary of these findings. Has the board considered requesting this delay?
So what I thought was, the monopoles are being placed in the railroad right-of-way, so we wouldn't have jurisdiction
No
on its
jurisdiction.
placement or the land use, so the impacts, it seems like, unless there's something clear that we can identify that there's residual impact on Concord-owned lands to the sides of it, they're being proposed for construction in the right-of-way. So I don't think we have much that we can do. And so that's where we looked at the potential of, under the historic
Property
viewshed,
impact table, right?
whether we had an opportunity to comment there. And there was only one monopole that looked like
I
it
mean,
would.
they'll have to come to the light plant, right?
Right.
To- They have to gain to
Yeah.
get power,
That was one of the concerns.
or do they have power running down the track?
The response from the T was they don't have power running down the track. They will have to connect to the grid. Yeah,
So
but
they
it does seem
can't.
to me, it's true
New
that
customer
we,
for the light plant.
we don't have the authority, but, pardon, can we deny them?
It'd be hard put to deny.
Right, I think,
Well, do we think that the various town committees and boards have had a chance to look at this? We know that the Historic
Historical
Commission has. Because that would be a reason, a legitimate reason to request an extension of time.
And I think the planning board well, you probably know from sitting on that, but the planning board was the one who who made the determination, because these were located in the railroad right-of-way, that we didn't have jurisdiction over the placement of the monopoles. I thought that was the planning board's review, and I could be wrong. Maybe you can recall a conversation about it. We
But it
could check
doesn't
in with
impact
Marcia
our
about
zoning,
that.
so how
I think
can
it
you?
was,
I think the only thing was
I think the
historical
sense was
viewscape.
that there was no jurisdiction, and so therefore there was no case to be made. And the final piece is whether or not we need additional time to notify and allow for public discussion, because I don't think very many people in Concord probably have any idea that these 3 poles are being proposed.
I think that's true. I think it's under the radar. And even though you have no jurisdiction.
We can make the
you can-
request.
The public will bear the burden of looking at these things, and I don't think it will enhance the service that the public nearby that looks at these things won't gain any benefit from it at all.
I
It'll-
think this is solely for the benefit
Of riders,
of commuters.
riders. And I think we asked if this, if the company was asked to look at lower poles, something like a 35-foot pole, typical utility pole, maybe more frequently spaced out, which might cost more. And the response was no, they were just directed to provide the lowest cost option. So it seems like maybe for slightly higher cost, they could have a less visual impact on our community.
I think if it was to discuss just relocating one pole like 100 feet in another direction, I think they would be probably willing to have that discussion.
So where are the three?
But anything else, I don't think why would they talk to them?
What was the order of magnitude of cost differences?
They weren't asked
Look
to
into it.
explore it. They didn't look into it.
Yeah.
If it was a minimum cost, I wonder if the town, donated the cost to keep them low, it might, be of service, might be worth it.
So I think it'd be worth asking if they would explore that, and maybe their answer would be no, but it just seems that cell towers, you live with cell towers because you use your cell phone every day, and at least you got to look at them, but you get the benefit of the improved service. But here,
No
you've
public
got the...
benefit to the
They
town
tend
of
not to
Concord.
focus on the beauty.
Right.
I don't think this is going to look like trees.
No, I think that's not in the proposal.
No. So are we comfortable moving this, thinking about
Having a letter.
having a letter move?
So the letter would be to request a time extension to coordinate with towns, committees, and boards? I guess there's no
And as well as
harm.
public
Yeah, I would
engagement.
want to ensure that we have been able to notify the citizens so that the citizens are knowledgeable. about
Right.
this.
So my only concern, I don't see any harm with issuing them a letter requesting it, but it's been known and discussed at boards for 2 months almost.
Well, board,
Okay,
but what about
boards.
the general citizen?
Right.
So that's not, so the question is that the
Is
MBTA's
there-
responsibility, or are we asking them to hold a public meeting to talk about the monopoles in general?
Well, you could
Or
ask the
town-
question, have there been or will there
There
be?
be a
Yeah,
public
public
meeting
meeting
to
meeting
discuss this.
scheduled?
I think that's
To be
probably,
fair.
that's probably a good idea.
I wouldn't mind asking them the question, have they considered the cost associated with putting lower poles farther apart?
Closer together.
Closer together,
together.
yeah.
Uh,
And where would they be and what would
Where would
that?
it be and how would the cost be? And
There's no harm in that. We have no jurisdiction. We have barely have standing on the
Right, we
location.
may not have, but we can certainly make the request.
well, I'm authorized-
Concord could laugh
us right out.
Right.
I moved to authorize the chair to write and sign on our behalf a letter to MBTA concerning proposed monopoles for wireless service in town.
One second.
Second.
All in favor?
Congratulations, Jane.
Aye.
Lucky me.
You could also reach out to Corey. She's aware of it.
Yep.
And she asked, I think her office asked, like, what would you like us to do? And so they know about it.
Mike,
I didn't speak to their office, but I'm sure he's probably
I'll
aware.
call him.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Great. More to do. How fun. All right, so now we're on to the exciting division, speaking of boards and committees, of our liaison responsibilities. Has everybody had a chance to review their new list? And is everybody comfortable with the horse trading that went on to establish this list?
Yeah, I'm good.
I have to say thank you to you, Steve, because I went to the first Magic meeting.
Oh, good.
And that was very interesting, and
It was the worst, for me, it was the worst appointment last year because every topic was interesting and I couldn't get out there during the middle of the day. So it was just frustrating for me.
right,
So
well,
thank you for
I
taking
think that'll be very,
Yeah.
very interesting to be involved in. And sort of not unlike when I had the NRC and the Cemetery Committee, which
On the same
were on
night.
the same night at the same time, every time. So, Are we ready to approve the select board liaison list?
That's a motion.
Does that need a motion?
Oh,
Yeah.
it seems to have.
I move to
a need.
approve the select board
Apparently so.
liaison list as drafted.
Official.
Second.
All in favor of
Aye.
their new liaisonships? Is that a aye?
Yeah, aye.
Okay, onward.
Do it twice.
Okay, and now we're looking at our meeting schedule. This is the
Town meetings.
town meeting schedule, right, well, this is our backbone.
Did anybody have a chance to reach out to the schools?
I know that the schools were notified, and I believe, and I know that the town moderator had signed off on this. I don't know that we've heard back from the schools.
Or the finance committee. So I think the intention for tonight was to be sure the board was comfortable with this schedule, then send it around formally to school committee, finance committee, other folks that might be impacted, and then finalize it, perhaps on June 19th or July 10th.
Okay,
But we mostly wanted to be sure the board was comfortable with the current plan, which reflects your second week of April annual town meeting.
So we're working backwards. We're looking at the schedule beginning for a town meeting beginning on April 9th. So
Right.
we're working backwards
Right.
from
Yep.
then.
Yep.
yeah, this year, Easter and the other, and the Jewish holiday, I'm sorry, Rosh Hashanah,
Early.
right, are early, so that cleared up any
And then,
conflicts.
school vacation.
And school vacation would come at the end of town meeting.
So I don't think we need a motion, we just
No,
need to.
just consensus, and then we'll
Put it out there.
formally send this out to the relevant boards and committees, planning
Great.
board, let them all know, and finalize it next time.
So the only question I have in this is, the warrant closes on January 2nd. And we have heard previously that that's a really bad day because it's right after the Christmas holidays, right after New Year's.
People haven't gotten home yet.
They haven't gotten home, they've been away, they've been distracted in whatever else they're doing to be able to be ready to have the warrant close first day of the new year.
So additional week would be,
I'm just
I don't think
reflecting
there's
on the
any-
comments that we heard, and if there's time to
Any-
extend it into the next week.
I don't think there's a,
Yeah.
I don't think there's a bylaw that establishes it. I think that's just been the practice of the board to open it in early December and close the warrant in early January, so I think you
So
could-
there's no
Add a week to it?
need,
So if we can add, if
Yeah.
it won't interrupt the rest of the schedule, I think that we heard, over the years that I've been on the board, we've heard that that's a really bad time to close the warrant because people haven't had time to.
Oh, let's extend it a week.
yeah,
If that's
give them an extra
possible.
week. I think
So,
that makes a lot of
So
sense.
close on the
Somebody
second,
will check to make
the
sure.
second Monday. We'll make sure there's no bylaw or other.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
There's a charter requirement that the budget be presented 90 days before town meeting, so we do have to, that's part of what drives the calendar, but that doesn't have
So
to
let's
do.
just check whether that,
That was a hiccup of an early town meeting.
Right.
Right. That's a good, thank you,
Second,
Alice,
so
for-
close second Monday of January. Okay.
right.
or figure out that we can open earlier and close before Christmas.
That seems almost as aggressive. I mean, would we have a time for all of the,
Yeah, I think if you close it too soon, then that maybe forces a special town meeting.
exactly, because people that haven't gotten
Because they
ready.
haven't had time. Okay,
Okay.
so we'll revise and send out to boards and committees for their comments with that change.
Right.
Okay.
Officially, did we hear back from the schools?
I have not heard back from the schools. I know that, that the
We've-
moderator had.
We've reserved the high school rooms for those dates.
Did the moderator indicate that she wanted to try the gym again?
I believe
I
that's,
believe that's what was
Yep.
said at the end of town meeting. So, okay. Well, we're just moving right through. So, next up would be to schedule our discussion of our board goals, which I will refresh in everybody's memory.
Item 13, select board
We
meetings.
do that every year.
I apologize, I skipped right over it.
These are the dates we talked about.
About, right, these are the dates that we discussed for our,
So I move to approve the 2017-18 select board meeting schedule.
has everybody taken a look?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Now, we're on to our scheduling of our discussion of the board
Can you just
goals.
put all those in my calendar for me?
Well, there's a trick. You can actually put all of the town's calendar into your calendar, but then your family has a real big problem with it. So, yes. Because it's not just a repeating. Not as easy as that. So, looking ahead, would people be ready, assuming they get a draft of the board goals from me this week? Do we want to schedule a discussion at the next, or perhaps move it into the middle of July?
No, let's try to do it.
Let's do it.
Let's do it, because you'll lose it'll be summer and,
Right.
But there's a lot of pressure on you to finish making your first cut of the.
Yes,
board
if there
goals.
is, but you know what?
okay, but it's a draft for you too, so,
Draft?
yeah, yeah.
I fully anticipate there'll be input. I've never seen this committee not. So, this board not. So, let's put it on the next,
6/19?
yep, 6/19. It's hard to imagine we're even in June, especially given the weather. All right, so now we're on to public comments. Dwindling public.
Carl Packard.
Yep, come on up, identify yourself.
Yeah. Carl Packard, 86 Butternut Circle, Chair of the Finance Committee, not speaking for the Finance Committee, and also not speaking about anything that has anything to do with finance, really. I just wanted to point out on the thing with the monopoles, though, that this is a Section 106 review, and so there's probably federal funds that are involved. And what it is that, and I know this from when I was on the Historic Districts Commission and HATS too, the federal, if they're going to be spent, they have to determine whether there are any historic resources that are going to be hurt by that expenditure. It doesn't mean that they can't spend the funds, but they have to review that. And so it's probably the authority is whatever federal agency is providing these funds. I don't know what these funds are, but it's a federal expenditure that triggers it. So it's not just the Historic Districts Commission purview over that one monopole over in West Concord, but it may be also that the Historical Commission may have something to contribute to that.
Okay, that's useful, thank you.
Thank you.
We don't have any idea how long that process, the federal review takes.
Longer than it takes for the.
That would be my guess as well.
I wonder if, we should find out if there's federal funding, but it sounds like it's a vendor kind of saying, hey, let me have access and I'll put them up and give you customer service, and then let
There
me,
must be federal funds involved somewhere, yeah.
maybe.
It's a
Thank
good
you.
point, thank you.
He's gonna piggyback other carriers and whatnot,
Yeah.
so.
Are there any other members of the public that want to?
You've been here the whole
Yeah.
evening, come on up. Anyone? Yeah.
Come on.
My name's Janet Benvenuti. I live on 35 Jonas Brown Circle. And I am one of the 17 trustees of the Monument Farm Trust. We have the responsibility of overseeing 70 to 75 acres of property, formerly known as the Monument Farm. That includes 3 private roads. It includes the access trail to the Estabrook Woods. We abut parcel A, where we'll be meeting with Delia on June 15th. That is that beautiful meadow that the town has had the responsibility for several years, actually 22 years, I know. I was the first landowner. And in those 22 years, in our deed, has been the responsibility to mow the field if the town didn't. And the town has never mown the field. So you have a letter from us in your papers that outlines our sincere and deep concern that we have not been part of the conversation. We made plans that have directly impacted our neighborhood, and when I say neighborhood, I don't just mean Monument Farm. I mean people who live on Monument Street, I mean Silver Hill Road, I mean people on Prospect Road, and also citizens throughout the town, including folks who've been in this room, who come and use the land. We're meeting with Delia on the 15th. I hope some of you will be here at that time, and because we intend to continue the conversation. We haven't left out of the conversation. We're here to begin to be part of the conversation. You have 17 people who have managed property and roads and access to the Estabrook Road woods without chaos, without calls to the police, for 22 years. And we are abutters. We were not on the Estabrook Woods Committee. The map that you saw tonight had 3 parking spaces. Are you aware that there's a website that has a 4th parking designation? Are you aware of that? We haven't even had the conversation yet about where the parking is going to be. So there's been some, there's a need for transparency, there's a need for engagement, and I hope that we're starting the conversation. So that's why we're here this evening. That's all that I can say this evening, but I hope we're going to continue to have the conversation. We will meet with Delia on the 15th, and I will be engaging further.
Great. As the liaison to the Estabrook Woods Access Study Committee, which was held in public, it was never closed to anyone. And it was not, as I think has been discussed in the past, it was not limited to Estabrook Woods Road. The members of the committee came from all over Concord. So I just want to make it clear that there was never any lack of transparency. In fact, Monument Farms came up a number of times as one of the access points, and it was no more singled out or left alone than any other, Chamberlain Woods. These were simply designations of public access. So there was never any deliberate lack of transparency. That's one, I do take exception to that, because it really was not.
I'm not here to debate that. The committee was formed in April. The first mention of Monument Farm Road was toward the end of April, and it would have been a simple matter for us to be sort of more engaged. And so we're not looking at the past. We're here, we're at the table now, we're talking about it. This is all about problem solving. We know how to manage roads without complication. We know how to manage access without complication. And we are very actively involved in the community.
Right.
And we intend to resolve this properly, so.
So is the meeting going to be here in Kai's Road, or will it be at?
According to Delia, she wants to meet at the Meadow June 15th.
Great.
Oh, perfect.
So that's where we'll be.
What time?
Thank you. 6 p.m., I think.
Great. Great, the mosquitoes. Bug repellent.
And I encourage you to walk the trail, but wear your boots.
I walked that trail.
Yes.
Number 2.
But thank you for speaking this evening.
Monument Farm at 6 p.m.
So we need
Yeah.
site visits?
What?
How many of you guys are gonna go? Because we'll probably need to do a posting.
I would post it just in case.
Right, yes, that
I
way,
don't know if I'll make
Let's-
it.
well,
I would
3
like to go.
anyway.
yeah,
I'll be there.
and I would,
Just
I'll
be
be there,
safe.
so.
If I don't get home to the budget, folks, can you bring it?
I will have bud juice on me.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. So was this a meeting that was set up just between Delia and the residents in that area?
Yes.
Yep.
I don't think I saw that.
Sir, looks like the public's gone.
Semi-public.
Semi-public. Are you back in your finance committee hat? Yeah. There we go. So, all right, liaison reports. Shall we do Mr. Ing?
Yeah, I attended a HATS meeting about a week ago. It was scheduled to kind of have as many local, like state representatives join us, but I think it was, I don't have my notes for who joined us. One state rep was there. I think they represented Lexington, or Bedford. And the main key point they were talking about is, I think we heard it at the MMA luncheon as well, is the revenue is really askew right now. And he was saying he felt it was a lot of folks with the estimated tax payments holding on to their payments because hoping there's some change in tax laws or whatnot. So it's kind of playing havoc with the income or monthly revenues with the state. So that was kind of a big concern. I brought up the marijuana legislation after being enlightened at the MMA lunch, and that's also quite a topic for all towns to be looking at. So it was a good conversation. I also attended the CHA meeting. I think we're also used to experiencing or talking about new affordable units. When you visit a CHA meeting, they talk about refurbishing old, units being, folks have moved out, coming in, how many boilers are going. I mean, the physical plant, it's a constant battle to keep those homes, those residence units kind of up and running. An interesting item on the agenda was Todd Benjamin, a member of the CHA, was suggesting to the board and the group about kind of generating or having a more planning, strategic vision with the way tax credits might be changing in the near future. He felt the CHA should kind of take the time and think about, do you want to be kind of part of a process, proactive with the changing landscape, or reactive? And that could mean, just a different approach to how they plan for new units, how to generate, the revenue to take. It just was perfect timing for why I was there to mention, the committee we were pulling together. So, but that was, it was good to see that board, that commission is, trying to think about how to approach things, on top of all the just hanging on and maintaining their existing housing stock. So that was great.
Well, the more I think that they can do, or that we all can do, to bring down the cost of
Yes.
trying to get affordable housing, the better for everybody, and making sure that we maintain the housing we have in a good standard is critical.
Yeah.
I mean, I think one issue that kind of has been lurking, I know with a lot of people, is the whole issue of air conditioning of the units.
Right.
We heard
Because
that
so
in
far,
terms
that
of
has
Junction
not been a
Village.
problem this summer, but it may well become.
Yeah, I mean, they were also thinking about the future in different ways, which was an interesting conversation, that some of the, locations of their properties, the designs were, from, earlier in years past, and housing's changed, and families that are looking for assistance in affordable, seeking affordable housing, they may see it, and it's just not that right kind of community design. And those could be opportunities for the CHA to kind of say, hey, let's revisit this development and, refurbish it or redo it to kind of match up with the way community design is kind of developing lately, so it's exciting. That's it for me.
Great. Let's see. I attended the trustees of town donations, and Mike was at this meeting as well, representing the interests of the Hugh Cargill Trust. It was a very hard meeting to talk about the policies of the trustees and their ability to fund in the way that they had been for the last 15 years or so, the Hugh Cargill Trust. And I think the outcome of the meeting was that trustees would think about whether there's a transitional path, not an abrupt change in their funding strategy. Are you familiar? I don't know if you had heard, the funding strategy was to only use funds that were earned interest on the account, allowing the principal to grow, which is a big change from how the funds were allocated before. But their concern is that if there's adequate principal and a growing principal, there'd be more reliable interest to be provided and offered on an ongoing basis to the Hugh Cargill Trust to spend.
Well, it's that middle category of funds, which is called temporarily restricted funds, which is an account where the proceeds from transactions go. So if you had something that was $1,000 and you sold it for $200 goes into this.
Yes.
And the concern was that historically, those monies had been available, and their current policy now doesn't make those funds available, only the interest.
They're just trying to restore back.
Yes, to build the capital back up so that they would be able to grow, bring in a greater reliable rate of return on the interest to be able to use that. And I think and for Hugh Cargill Trust, it was, a very hard message where they had twice a year funding of 15,000 or something, 30,000 a year, and they just don't have that. They've been offered 4,000. And there are a lot of people in our community that need help and support, and this was an abrupt change. So they're looking at their policies.
It was a hard meeting.
It was hard.
But it was a good meeting. They were listening. There were representatives from Hugh Cargill Trust there. And I thought it was a tough meeting, but it was.
Yep, it was productive. I think it was good.
Is there a plan to build?
So I think what they're looking at is their investment strategy to figure out a middle ground where they can grow the principal, grow the capital, while also allowing some use of what is currently temporary restricted funds to be able to provide, maybe not as a robust amount to the Hugh Cargill Trust, but some amount of money so that they can start weaning their own interests and maybe even work with their clients to say, we don't have the spending ability that we had.
I think at your initiation, we also talked about the board getting involved, not in their business or Hugh Cargill Trust, but looking at all up at the monies that the town has available and what else, if anything, we might be doing. So I think it's an agenda item.
Yeah, I think it's on a future agenda item to talk about, is there a role for the select board to play in raising funds or securing some amount of funds for those in our community who are really needing it, above and beyond this one?
Well, it's something we're seeing in the long-range plan. I mean, we know that there's a mismatch between funds and need, and the need is growing.
Right.
Yes, so I hope if I could ask that you maybe slide this into your goal statement so that we can, get it.
And it's also somewhat involved in some of the other conversations that have happened in town when we have a tax relief interest and the home rule petition, which reminds me, June 8th is our election day.
Yep.
For those who.
Cannot forget that.
We have an important election coming on June 8th, two big items on it. One is the approval of the landfill cap that was approved at town meeting, and the other is for the home rule petition.
Yeah. Senior means
Senior main test.
7 to 8.
I'm sorry, what is that?
7 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Is it open all
7
day?
a.m. to 8 p.m.
Oh, that's good. I was thinking.
And are all of the different polling places open?
Standard places.
Standard places, okay.
Awesome.
Great.
So I have two other things, I won't take long. One is, there is a groundbreaking for the Minuteman Regional Technical High School on June 14th at 9:15. Because school will be in session, we do need, let me know if you're gonna be there and I'll submit your names so that they know who's going to be coming for the groundbreaking. I plan to attend.
The 19th, you said?
Nope, the 14th at 9:15,
Shovel?
maybe.
Okay.
I don't know, but maybe it's a bucket truck. I just want to let folks know there was a great deal of planning going on, and there are 2 votes were taken at this evening's meeting that would put in place a contract for the site work to begin and for electrical connections to be made from the Mill Street to the building, the back of the building. The way that this project is being approached, I think, is considerably different than how the CCHS project was moving along. This project is looking at fully funding 100% design and capability as projects become available and ready for bidding. And so without the final designs with the school building, MSBA, right, MSBA, they have approved incrementally different aspects of the whole project. So the site plan work was ready for bidding at 100% of the design for the site plan. And so that was bid out, and that is going to begin, and that's what's driving the groundbreaking on June 14th, because the actual site work will begin later that week. Similarly, you can bring in the electrical line, because you know you need the electricity. It's a small contract, it's 150,000 or something. But it allows other parts of the project to keep moving forward. Within 30 days, there'll be a 60% design on the whole project for review and budget reconciliation.
They have a very ambitious timetable.
They do, and they, right now, are a year ahead of schedule.
Wow.
And on budget. So when bids came in and they were over budget on they had detailed cost analysis. I have all of it here if anyone's interested. They value engineered a lot as they went along so that they could reserve funds if they need it in their 12% overage that they need it later on. And if there's extra savings as other parts of the project come online and are bid, there'll be monies to go back and again value engineer in some of the things that were left out. They wanted a stone wall the entire length of the walk from the parking lot to the building. So they get part of that stone wall, which is the major part of it. But so they took part of that wall out, and the building and the design will be fine. Would it be better with a full stone wall? Yeah, but the cost of a stone wall, and so that was a piece that got value.
What's the linear footage for a stone wall? You got that value in there?
Probably, but I
Times 300.
That sounds like you might want to know.
That's how you do it. That's how you do it.
So
It sounds like a process to learn from.
I think there's a different way
It's the new model. I mean,
Yeah.
schools used to be bought by, you draw a set of drawings and then you bid it out. Everyone's bonded and
Yeah,
And off it goes.
companies go out of business before things get completed.
and so this is a different approach than the high school took in building.
It's great.
So several big things. The FAA approved the height of the building for the fly loft.
Wow.
There was a request, a petition that the property was not, should not be made available for a school, but the Dover Amendment superseded that so that the school can be built on the property. Lincoln approved, the planning board approved the project, and after many discussions with the Lincoln Conservation Commission, an order of conditions was provided 2 weeks before the actual order of conditions was provided for the whole project, so there was time for review and some change of scope to make sure that the project would meet the order of conditions. So when the order of conditions was let this week, the project is ready for groundbreaking on the 14th.
Wow.
So there's a lot of really close collaboration and willingness to look at the project and, make the changes needed to keep this thing on task and on budget. So it's looking pretty good. A lot of exciting stuff happening. And if someone else will talk about the comprehensive long-range plan, the number of us were at the meeting this week. And I attended a meeting in Acton of the town wells, a discussion of the impact of the NMI Superfund site on the town wells in Acton. there was a very large turnout, probably close to 80 people were in the room talking about the concerns about the drinking water, as you can imagine. A lot of the concerns were directed at the cleanup schedule and the cleanup designs that the federal government is putting in place for the cleanup of MMI.
As Alice said, attended the trustees meeting, was at the Envision Concord, I hope we'll talk about that in detail. And then attended the Hugh Cargill Trust Committee. Also, I just mentioned, I also represented the select board at the Thoreau First Day
Thank you.
Stamp event at the Walden Pond Visitor Center. It was a really nice event. There was 200 plus people there. It was pretty interesting. That I kind of like.
A number of the members of the Committee on Disability attended the Trails Committee, and there was a discussion, and then they went out to the Harry Beyer new trail, which for the disabled, talking about access or whatever, and it was a very upbeat, wonderful article in the Concord Journal with a nice picture, and that was kind of a really nice celebration. And otherwise, it's been trying to sort of staff up with new people, a number of the committees.
We have quite a few nominations here.
We do, we do.
And you mentioned the disability committee, and it strikes me, Chris, that when we look at the parking study on Monument Road, one of the things that we had in the original parking plan for whether it be the 12 parking spaces, whether they be parallel or in the lot.
Was it handicap?
One was gonna be designated as a handicap site, or space. So we need to keep that in the mix when this gets to further study.
No, I think that's a good point, and parking along Monument Street might be not the
More
easiest.
challenging.
Well,
Off
we
of
need to look
line,
at
you
it.
gotta watch the pitch of the road, everything,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
very hard. Very hard.
So that basically was the one that the Bruce Friedman put off their meeting because they were lacking a quorum. I think.
Okay. Well, as many have discussed, the Envision Concord, which is the public-facing component of the Comprehensive Long-Range Planning Committee's work, that had their kickoff on May 31st last week at the high school. May 31st was a very busy night for many, and unfortunately, our public outreach had some hiccups in it, but I think we had a really interesting mix of about 60 people, I think, who came. And our Civic Moxie is has been retained by the planning committee to lead us through this process, and this was their first. It was a World Cafe setting. So we sat at tables, went through 3 questions about Concord, and then put our answers up on pieces of paper on the walls. And does anybody remember what the 3? I'm blanking on the 3. I think one was, if somebody was coming to Concord, what would you describe as
What you love most
what you
about
love
Concord.
most about Concord? Then what would you change about Concord? And there was a third one that we're getting that way. It'll come to us.
Yeah.
But it was a great kickoff, and one of the things, and this leads to the earlier conversation, or sort of will take us into conversations about CCTV, because Gary Kleiman and Elise Woodward had been interviewed by Court Booth by CCTV in advance of this to discuss the comprehensive long-range plan. They're chairs of the committee, discuss the process, and to give everybody a heads up about the Envision Concord. And it would be really interesting to know what percentage of those who attended had seen that in advance.
Yeah.
Because, and I would advise anybody who hasn't had a chance to look at that interview to take a look at it. I know it's available on the website. And we will go back into our regular planning committee schedule. I also, as I said earlier, attended the MAPC Magic meeting, my first one. It's a group of 16 towns, and it was our annual meeting, which is largely a election of officers and mostly catch up for me since I was one of the new ones on the committee. Thought it was very interesting. The areas of focus are going to be, let's see, if I can find them here in front of me. There was a discussion of planning for age-friendly communities and regions, as well as transportation, and also climate change. It was very interesting to listen to the MAGIC agenda and see how much overlap and actually how much thought has already gone into the comprehensive long-range plan in Concord that parallels what the 16 towns are looking at. And I was proud of Concord because really we are
Right out front.
right out front. I wanted to finish sentences, but being new to the committee, I'm not shut. And that was my list. That's my list.
That's great.
Right.
So.
Magic is a great group.
It
It's not
is.
just several when you have to.
Yeah.
It is.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
It is. So now we have miscellaneous correspondence. I know that we did get a number of letters that were referenced today by the folks who joined us from both the Monument Farms area as well as the Monument Street parking areas of NRC. Let me see if there are any other, specifics that are, you think that I missed here? I think we may have had one item that came in late, but I don't think I've had a chance to read that.
Mike Barrett, I forwarded you the email that the letter that you sent last week got to them, and they were gonna talk about that. It got to the House, regarding the changes to the town charter.
Okay, yep.
So I just got confirmation from state council that they received it.
Great.
Fully processed.
Good.
I walk my dogs every evening, and I will say, I guess there's a petition that has gone along, and there is a lot of interest in terms of allowing dog walking.
Yes. I think
I'll leave it at that, but I think that's gonna be an issue that we're gonna have to, well, we may not have a lot of
I think
authority
that's
over.
directly in the NRC's.
Right, but it
court.
is it's a very interesting issue that is generating a lot of
Yeah.
interest.
Yeah. You're aware of this, right? Yeah.
Yes, it is.
The three parcels
It
of
is a
conservation.
four-legged issue
Yes.
that I
On-
have
on
to.
leash.
And not everybody's wagging their tail.
No, I said,
Well
I have
said.
two at home, so I appreciate all of the complexities. And I look forward to hearing more from the NRC about their jurisdiction, because they are state
Yeah.
mandated to look at a number of factors that some of us who have very specific interests don't have to look at. So
And you're retaining NRC as one of your committees, right?
I am staying up till I get to go on Wednesday night and see what's next. Any other correspondence, miscellaneous items? So I think we have some committee nominations.
I nominate David Carr, 82 Losbrook Road, to Tax Fairness Committee for a term to expire May 31st, 2020. Kristen Ferguson at 218 Thoreau Street to the Planning Board for a term to expire May 31st, 2022. Terry Ackerman of 89 Heats Bridge Road to the Community Preservation Committees as the Select Board Representative for a term to expire May 31st, 2021.
Doesn't require a
Doesn't
motion.
require a motion. How about appointments?
I move the Select Board appoint Suzanne Knight of 64 Bayberry Road and John Soden of 12 South Meadow Ridge to the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Advisory Committee for terms to expire May 31st, 2020. Eric Van Loon of 95 Martins Point Road to the Tax Relief Committee for a term to expire May 31st, 2020.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And how about our reappointments?
I move to reappoint Michael Lawson of 1695 Lowell Road to the Financial Audit Advisory Committee for a term to expire May 31st, 2018. Brian Kramer of 820 Monument Street, Emily Wheeler of 1289 Main Street, and Steve Verrill of 415 Plainfield Road to the Agricultural Committee for terms to expire May 31st, 2020.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Can you second your own appointment?
I don't know. I'm wondering about that.
Let's see
Oh,
what
it's a
happens.
reappointment.
Does that mean I don't have to do it?
Yeah.
Perhaps, Andrew, you'll be able to help us. I know a number of our committees are in need of additional members. I know CSEC is looking for members. The Historical Commission just ran an article in the Concord Journal for new members.
So can you volunteer for these committees, please?
No,
All of them?
we did just get in
Right.
like a host of green cards.
Oh,
Good,
great.
good, good.
So those will be getting into your
Great.
clipboard and,
Wonderful.
but there's CSEC and Historical Commission, I know off the top of my head, there's like two or three.
Personnel board is down one, I think.
Which one?
Personnel board.
Personnel board is down one.
And I noticed when I looked at the trustees of town donation that one of the term expired at town meeting.
So you need to find,
Yeah.
well, trustees of town donations is a financial investment strategist, is I think primary responsibility.
So some of this
And
is,
that's-
CHC.
I think that's probably the skill most needed for the
So
trustees.
you said trustees, Historical Commission, and what was the,
Trustees, CSAC, Historical Commission are ones that I'm most familiar with needing members.
well, maybe now that everybody that we've,
Oh,
What about
Public health, we are
the light
also
plant?
looking for a nurse to replace Joanne as
The
our
light
hire,
plant,
so we're
too.
looking for a nurse.
Well, Peggy told me they had.
Great, by the way.
I'll look into all these ones.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye. Oh, I'll go to this engineer, Corps of Engineers.